I want to show you how to sharpen the spindle roughing gouge, and several of the things I'm going to show you will apply to all of the sharpening processes for all the different tools. There are a number of different ways to do it, and in our 15 years here at the classroom we've determined which one we feel is the safest way to get that done. One of the ways could be to use the arm of the sharpening fixture, put the tool here and rotate it, but we've not liked that because of the possibility of this slips, the tool coming down in here and damaging or breaking the stone. It is a high risk sharpening technique which we do not do. This technique is not used here. This is the way we do it. This is just a platform, and there's several different ones that can be used. Anyone will do the job. What we're going to do is lay the tool flat on the platform and simply roll the tool against the sharpening stone like this. It requires you to be sure that you don't raise and lower your handle or you accidentally fan it. So I want to do it very straight because I want to keep this edge square like I just mentioned a little while ago. To get the angle just right, here's a technique that works really, really well. I'm going to take a felt marker and I'm literally going to color the edge of this tool. And now I'm going to go to the grinder and very quickly just touch that edge. Don't need it up at full speed. And if you could look closely, you would see that the grinder is touching this edge from the very cutting edge to the very heel of the bevel, that it's making proper contact. If it was touching just at the top, that means the platform is set a little too high and needs to be lowered. If it was touching just at the heel, I'd have to adjust the platform up. So you can easily adjust your platform to get an optimal touch on the whole edge. I had this one preset to save us a little time, but I did check it by running that black felt marker across there. So here's the sharpening technique. Let the grinder come up to speed. Lay the tool flat here. The left hand is just holding it down. My right hand is at the heel of the tool to do this. So I'm going to bring it up, touch it to the wheel, and roll it around. I don't know if you see that very well, but one pass, because I had pre-sharpened this tool with this exact setting. So when I went back to touch it up, it required very little extra work. If you have to readjust a lot, you'll do some regrinding, and that shortens your tool life. We're at the sharpening system again, and I want to show you two different ways of sharpening the skew chisels. One is a machine way, and the other is the way we do it in the classroom, which we think is a little safer for us. So you take your grinder, if you're using the one-way Varigrind system, insert the long arm, and there is a particular fixture that's just for using skew chisels. It goes on the end of the arm, locks down, and your skew then is placed in one pocket on the left, lined up, sharpened this way. It's taken out, put on the other side, and the other side sharpened. You'll get a little bit of radius, but very little, because of the movement through this arc. But this gives you a very repeatable grind. It works fine for the oval skew chisels, which we do not use in the classroom because this is the only safe way to really do an oval skew. We don't do this, actually. Sorry about that. So let's show you how we really do it in the classroom. This is, I think, a safer method to use. It requires a little bit more skill. What we've said is we set the platform at the angle for all the skews in the classroom so we can sharpen them like this. But I need to test that to be sure it's the right angle. So we'll go back to a felt marker like we did in the last lesson. And I'm just going to black up the edge, both sides. And I'm going to turn the grinder on for just a second. And I'm going to be able to find out whether this is the right angle. It's taking all of the ink off, which means this platform is going to match the curve on this tool, so I can go ahead and sharpen it and grind it in this case. the speed. On the platform, slide it up to the wheel, pass across, a couple of strokes, opposite side, same thing. Good. Okay, here's the tool as it just came off the grinder. I don't know if you can see this in the video, but the light in the room allows me to see that right along this edge there's a small burr. And if I touch this edge, it feels pretty sharp. But what happened is that burr is like this. The metal is so thin that the edge is rolled over. And because it's rolled over, it's not as sharp as it can be. So I'm going to do one more thing. I have here a strop. This is just a board with a piece of leather belt attached to it. And I've rubbed it with a little bit of abrasive. And I'm going to take this and not push it into it, but I'm going to stroke. And you can't see it, but I can see that burr turning up here. I'm going to flip it over, and I'm going to push the burr the other direction. And after about 2 or 3 strokes, that burr will break off. And when I now come to feel the edge, as one of our famous turners said, that's scary sharp. Don't always have to do this. This is the most aggressive sharpening technique you'll have to do. Many times, after it gets a little dull, I can simply come and strop it again. And if that's not good enough, I take one of those diamond wheel hones or that little pocket card I showed you earlier, and I can do that. And the very last, most aggressive way to do that is to do what I've just done. We are at the Sharpening Center. I brought both of the gouges I had demonstrated earlier with, so we can take a look at both of them. The way we do it at our school is to use a stabilized sharpening fixture that's made by one way. When we put the gouge in here and rotate it, it can't come off the side of the wheels accidentally. So this is the way we find to be most safe. The second thing about this is the fact that the grinds on a spindle or bowl gouge, shallow fluted or deep fluted, is fairly complex. And to do that by hand requires a lot of practice, and most of us just want to get the tool sharp, get back to work again. So let me show you how we do that. Tool goes through the sharpening fixture, which is called a Varigrind, or Varigrind 2 in this case. We extend it through the tool a very specific length. In our case, it's 2 inches, and that's the distance from this edge here to this little piece of metal. So I projected the tool through 2 inches. I've tightened it. Now, the fixture comes down across the flute, keeping this tool square and level. So that's important. The notch goes into the notch. The tool then ends up resting against the wheel, and the simple process of dropping the handle from one side to the other gives you that complex curve. There's a lot of adjustments. I can adjust this length. In our case, we have fixed this at a length that gives us the grind we want. We've actually put a screw into this to prevent it from being misadjusted. So the length is 2 inches. This angle, I don't know what it is, but it's the one that gives us this particular curve. Drops in here like that. Sharpening is a matter of simply allowing it to rotate against the wheel. So let's do this one real quick. Grinder on. Up to speed. Drop in here. I don't want to ever hold down here. I want to stay on the other side. Now that's it. That's it because the angles on this tool are exactly the same as they were the last time it was sharpened, because the fixture has no adjustments in it. That means that this is always going to produce that same grind again, and that is sharp, and all it took was a couple passes. Small gouge. This is one of mine from home, and the angle on the back of this is a little bit more acute than what we use here at the school. So I'm going to go through the same device, but to give a more acute angle, what I've done is actually extended it farther than the 2 inches. I've got a pencil mark over here at 2 1/4. And I'm going to tighten it down. And I'm going to do the same thing. All it's done is elevated the tool up the wheel a little bit farther, and it's going to create a little bit more acute angle. That tool was just resting against the wheel. Any pressure from my hands were only there to make sure it stayed in touch with the wheel. I don't need to push. I don't want to take away metal. I want this tool to last as long as possible. So I've got 2 gouges that are sharp, but I want to show you a hand method, because there's a lot of times you might go to someone's shop with your tools and their grinders are set up for their particular needs, and you may want to sharpen by hand. Okay, we're at a grinder now that has a standard aluminum oxide wheel and a platform. The platform I preset so that when I lay my tool here and bring it up to the face of the wheel, there's perfect contact between the back of the bevel and the face of the wheel. So that needs to be aligned. My next step is going to be to hold the tool flat on the platform, rotate and swing the handle to the right. And then I'll do the same thing, rotate and swing the handle to the left. This is why it takes some practice, because this is not easy. But there are some tools that will not fit into this fixture. There are some tools that are too short or too small in diameter to work. You're going to have to learn a hand sharpening technique for those. So this is what it looks like. Grinder's up to speed. I'm going to start in the center, come up. There's the right side. Now I'm going to start in the center and go to the left, up to the wheel. There's the left side. And I've got the same bevel all the way around. I brought 3 over to the grinders for us to take a look at. They're standard diamond parting tool, my favorite fairly wide one, and there's one I made out of an industrial hacksaw blade. I'm going to treat all 3 of them exactly the same way. So we're going to go to this one wheel. It has a platform. We'll come right down into this area. I don't care what angle the platform's set at, because it's just a place for me to rest my hand. I'm going to rest my hand here. I'm going to lay the tool against the wheel when it's running, heel of the tool, bring it up until the tip just touches, and I'm going to hold it there without wiggling or rotating until I see sparks starting to come over the top edge of the tool. And then I lift it up, reverse it, and come back down and do the same thing. There is an arm that comes with the sharpening fixtures that allows you to hold this tool at the very end of the handle against the wheel. We find that's not the safest way. So we're back to hand sharpening again as being our safest technique. So let me show you, excuse me, with the diamond parting tool first. It's an 80 grit wheel, up to speed, heel, light. There's the toe touching. And I'm seeing sparks come over the top edge. Roll it over. The wider tool has a shorter bevel, but same exact action. Thin tool, I have 2 planes I could sharpen, the short or the long. I'm going to sharpen the shorter one. Now, if this grinds away enough metal and it begins to climb, the edge begins to climb too high up on the tool, I can always turn it over. I start sharpening the other bevel to start driving that edge back down again. All tools done in precisely the same way. Remember the fluted tool, we can't turn it over like that. We can only sharpen the back edge of the blade. I'm at the Sharpening Center, and I'm going to show you 3 different ways of sharpening a bowl gouge. One I use at home. Many of you might be using the same technique, and one we reserve specifically for school, which we think is a little bit more safe. And then a third one for when you go visiting somebody else. So, little mystery here. I do it at home by using the one-way Wolverine and Varigrind system. And the original one looked like this. This angle is set to control the tip. The length of this arm controls the angle on the side of the tool. So this is set up to match mine. So what I do is I put it into the holder, and I set the distance to 2 inches, which happens to be the distance this block is. It's also the distance we have here on the grinders. We've set that up 2 inches up. So now, locked in place, I'm going to sharpen one side. I'm going to sharpen the other side until I like those 2 sides. And then I'm going to make one last pass all the way over. In other words, I'm not spending much time on the center of the tool. The reason is there's not much metal there. Most of the mass is on the left and the right side. Now this length has been set to match my gouge before we started the video. This angle is mine because I brought this from home, so I know this angle is correct. As I said, that's the tip angle. This length establishes the side angle, and I use the magic marker technique to get these angles all set up, so we save some time. So this is me sharpening one of my gouges. Back in here, left side. Right side. And one over the tip. And I'm happy. I'm happy because at home or at our studio here, when we are sharpening, we're not changing the settings. We're leaving things alone. So all we're really doing is dressing the edge, bringing it up to tight home. We're not grinding a lot of metal. If this was reset a lot, then we would be wasting a lot of metal, a lot of tool cost, and a lot of our time in trying to get that angle back again. So this is the way I would do it at home. And many of you would use the same system. We've changed to another system here at school because of this motion here and the concern I had of students maybe coming off the side of the wheel accidentally. So One Way has made a second system, which is a stabilized version of the Varigrind, and I'm going to show that to you next with a different tool. We're now at a different grinder, and the one that we have at school for doing specifically the deep fluted gouge. Here's a similar holder, but it sets into a V-slot, and the limitation on the motion side to side is really important for us. So I'm still going to set up the gouge by sticking it in here, setting it to 2 inches, locking it nice and tight. This piece of plastic comes down against the flute and keeps it squared in this angle here. So now this little notch sets in that notch. It rests against the wheel, one side, the other side, and then the pass over. And all the time, this tool has not moved from the center of this particular wheel. So the risk of running off the side of the wheel and getting your hand or the tool into a dangerous place is eliminated. So let me show you sharpening with this fixture. I think we've got it. Okay, sharpening technique number 3. This is a little harder to master. So for beginners and intermediates, I suggest some type of a sharpening fixture that allows you to reposition your tool and get a sharp edge without a lot of wasted metal. But let's just say you have to sharpen a tool that doesn't fit one of those fixtures for some reason. It's too small, too short, or you're not in your shop. You're in a place where someone else's fixture is already preset for their needs. You might want to learn a hand sharpening technique. And what I've done here is set the platform on a grinding wheel to match the angle of the center of the bevel here. And what I'm going to do now is rest the tool on the platform and roll the tool to do the side. Now, what's hard about this one is rolling the tool to do the side and getting that right. And then you got to roll the other direction. It'll take a lot of practice, and I suggest you take an old tool that's pretty well beat up and one that you're willing to work with for a while, because it's going to take you some time. So it looks like this. Flat on the platform. I check the angle and I'm about right. I'm exactly right. Keep it flat. Other side. You may not be able to see that as well as I can. This edge has a perfectly good, sharp cutting surface. And that comes from the practice of being able to do this. There are other ways, but this is a way that needs some practice. One of the things we can do is to actually raise the burr on the edge of the scraper. If I'm dealing with softer woods, that burr is my cutting element. If it's harder woods, generally the burr breaks off in the first cut and we're really using the edge. But for me to get this sharp and a burr raised, very first thing I'm going to do is take my card to the face of this, and what I'm doing is making sure that there's any remnant of a burr and that's taken off. I can see a little shiny area right around the edge, and what I've done is removed that burr. Now, high-speed steel, I can push up a new burr on this very easily. I could use the handle of a screwdriver. I could use any other hardened rod that would work, but Veritas makes a device specifically for this purpose. I've mounted Veritas shaper sharpening device on a block of wood. It consists of a pin and a carbide point. And I'm going to put it in the vise I have here on this bench as a way of holding it. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to set the tool against the pin and push it up against this carbide post. And what that's going to do is push a burr back up again. Believe it or not, I could do this with the blade of a screwdriver, but it's not convenient. Just like that, 2 strokes. I can feel the burr on this tool. You can't see it, but it's there. So, to me, that's 80% of the sharpening for a scraper. Can we go to the grinder, match this bevel angle, run the tool around and match that 15 degrees? Absolutely. But most of the sharpening on your scrapers is done by making sure the space is flat. A belt sander, not running, with the tool shoved back and forth across that flat platen, will also do the job. And then to the burnisher, the pin is just simply a lever point. 2 pushes, and that has a burr on it again. Sharpening scrapers. There is a back edge that's been radiused on this a little bit, so it won't drag.